So my story is still happening, but it all started about like 5 or 6 years ago now. It was like my second wedding anniversary, and I was like, all right, time for babies. But the universe was like, nope. And I went to go see a reproductive endocrinologist, and they found 2 large cysts on my ovaries, which was preventing me from getting pregnant. And then I had those removed. It was very invasive surgery. I have like 9 stitches on my body. Actually, maybe it's like 7, but it feels like 9. And after that, I was like, okay, I jumped that hurdle. Let's get pregnant now. But then, actually, no, a month after my surgery, my spouse was laid off from his job, and we lost our health insurance, and I was unable to get medication because I had been diagnosed with stage 3 endometriosis, which was also contributing to the primary infertility. The cysts came back, and I had to have another surgery 10 months after my first one, and it was terrifying. But it was after that I was able to start in vitro fertilization. However, just due to the endometriosis, we were only able to have 1 viable embryo, and I know for a lot of other people that are going through IVF, like really like all you need is 1, so I truly feel blessed about that, even though it was really scary not having any in storage, not having any backups. We just went for it, and the embryo like stuck, and then I was pregnant, and then literally at our first scan we found out that the embryo had split, and I would be pregnant with identical twin girls. And this was right in the middle of COVID. I ended up having a really complicated pregnancy. I had preeclampsia, I had cholestasis of pregnancy, I was pregnant with multiples, all of these different risk factors. One of the twins was smaller than the other, they just weren't developing at the same rate, and I ended up giving birth 7 weeks early by emergency C-section, and then the girls stayed in the NICU for about a month, and we brought them home in August 2020, so they were born July 21st, 2020. And on September 24th, 2020, we woke up and one of our babies, Aurora, did not. And it still is like the worst experience of my entire life. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. And she had passed away from sudden unexplained infant death, so completely unexpected. I barely even remember my surviving daughter. Her name is Serena, so Aurora and Serena. And I remember I really struggled during her first year, when you're supposed to be celebrating all these milestones of, oh, tummy time, and like, oh, she can like move her head, isn't that exciting? They were all like just tinged with grief. I was still grieving like the loss of my daughter while also raising my other one, and even to this day, it's gonna be 3 years this year, and it's still unbelievable to me that, first of all, that I went through all of that infertility, that I had to have all of those surgeries, that I was administering needles of hormones and progesterone to myself for weeks, all to have this 1 embryo, and then all of a sudden it splits and I have twins, and then 1 died. So as an artist, I put all of those emotions, I put my grief, I put my pre-existing anxiety and depression that have become so much worse since losing my daughter, I put all of that into my paintings. And one of my friends, Eric Moja, who I think went earlier, he said that, when you first see my paintings, you see them, you see the vibrancy, you see the colors, but once you hear the story, it's then that you really feel them. And I think now that you all know the story, this series that I'm debuting with the Barber Show is actually about the anger that I feel, the envy, the resentment the confusion, all these negative feelings that no one ever wants to talk about, like, let's start talking about them. Because I know I'm not the only one who goes through this, because 1 in 4 women experiences loss of a pregnancy or an infant, and like it's mind-boggling to me, because when I was going through it, it was so isolating, and on top of that it was COVID, but I just felt so alone. And then once I started sharing my story more and more, I would have women say to me, oh my gosh, I went through something similar. And being able to share my story, to also memorialize my daughter who died, and she was 65 days old. Being able to do that and recognize the trauma that not only I've been through, but I'm sure a lot of other women have been through, that's when we know that my story is so much bigger than me, because it's so much more relatable, because everyone, it's like the story of humanity, because it's literally trying to procreate, trying to conceive, and then having it be followed by like the death of your child, which is it goes against the laws of nature. It's always supposed to be the parents that go first, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. In my case, that's what happened, and in a lot of other people's cases who have lost their infants too, it's part of the human condition that I feel is not talked about enough, not acknowledged enough. And I want to do that with my art, because like I said earlier, I don't want anyone to ever go through what I went through, but also to have to carry all of those emotions, those heavy, complex feelings that are uncomfortable to talk about. No one should have to carry that weight. Like, we should just be able to be open and talk about it. So if I have to do it in neon colors and glitter, because rainbows and sparkly things make me happy, then that's how I'm going to do it, because I'm an artist.
Oh.
I also want to say that, sometimes when people are grieving, other people who are not, or who have never experienced grief before, don't really know how to talk to someone grieving. And one piece of advice is, all you can do is acknowledge their loved one who's gone. Even though they're gone, I still want to feel her presence, and I know that she is in every one of my paintings, because it's always her that I'm thinking of when I'm painting. And people say that things happen for a reason, and after hearing my story, I still don't know what that reason could be, but I'm going to make it so that something really powerful comes out of this loss and this experience. And I've always wanted to be an artist, so I'm putting myself out there and following my dreams, and I'm doing it in her memory. So that's my feeling. Oh, and all of the pieces all of my paintings have a dedication to her. So anyone who has my paintings also has a piece of her memory, and she truly lives on through my paintings. And I also think it's really cool to see my paintings evolve, because that's the closest I'll ever be to seeing her grow up with her twin sister. And I was looking at some of my paintings earlier, and they reminded me so much of the previous work that I had shown at earlier start shows, especially that abstract. At the last one, at the New You exhibition, I debuted this really cool series of abstract pieces that all had titles, relating to my infertility struggle, to my pregnancy trauma, and I feel like those abstract elements are now coming into, back into my paintings. But I'm still adding landscape details, so that when you're looking at it, that it is the Aurora Borealis, because I paint auroras for Aurora. but there's still so much like energy and vibrancy and emotion. And that's what I want my paintings to convey, because I think that's what I convey, because I can't help it, because those are all the emotions that are going through me, and I'm putting it into my art.